Hi, everyone. Welcome to the final event of our virtual conference on the future of packaging. I'm Amanda Davis Winters, a managing director with L.E.K's packaging and industrial practice. Thank you all for attending, but also for your resiliency in accommodating this year's virtual format. History has shown us that crisis drives innovation, and the fact that we've been able to meet today despite a global pandemic is evidence of that. Which is why it's especially relevant that we're closing our conference with a discussion on the innovation in packaging in the wake of COVID-19. We'll get to that in a moment, but I just want to take care of a few housekeeping items. Feel free to join us in conversation. You can submit questions for the panelists through the chat tool on your screen, and we'll do our best to respond to those throughout the event. We also encourage you to connect with your fellow attendees by using the chat feature, scheduling meetings, and joining the lounge for continued conversation after the panel. And if you need any support with the conference platform, please email Brittany Norden or Megan DeNovellis. All 4 of the sessions will be recorded and shared with registrants after the event. So now back to the main event. We'll first hear from our keynote speaker, and from there we'll dive into the panel discussions, follow up with some Q&A. With us today is Adam Page. He's the Global Director of Research and Reports at Smithers. Adam is responsible for off-the-shelf market reports and leads the delivery on many custom market consultancy projects each year. During his 20 years with Smithers, Adam has published or delivered hundreds of market studies, reports, technical books, and single client projects across a range of industries. To assist with research, he's developed a global network of experts, consultants, and researchers that contribute to many projects each year. Adam is also a member of the Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals. With his talk today, Adam will lead off with some megatrends going on in the packaging space. Then we'll dive into 4 key innovations in packaging with a look at some key market trends and some real life examples of disruption. With that, I'll hand it over to Adam.
Thanks, Amanda. Hi, good morning. My name's Adam Page. I'm the Director of Research and Reports at Smithers. And as mentioned, I'm looking to give a presentation today on the major innovations in packaging, the main opportunities, the disruption in this space, the challenges and the threats, and how we see things playing out over the next 5 years. My background at Smithers, as mentioned, I've been here for 20 years. And I oversee the market reports business. So I'm in contact with my wide network of subject matter experts, technical experts, market researchers and analysts. And the presentation today is an overall summary of all of the trends and the research that we've seen in the packaging space. I'm going to start with an overview on the main packaging trends, how we see these trends playing out over the next 5 years. And then I want to drill down into the 4 specific hot topics that are transforming the packaging space, starting with sustainability, and then also looking at product safety and brand protection, looking at what's happening in e-commerce, and then finally rounding it out with an overview on digital print and what's happening with inkjet and print on packaging. So just to start with, we see kind of 6 main megatrends that are impacting on the packaging industry. They have a different impact on the different major substrates in this space. We're all aware of the major kind of anti-plastic sentiment. And so when it comes to sustainability, which really is the #1 trend that's impacting on packaging at the moment, that's having a negative impact broadly across the plastic space. There's an ongoing trend towards lightweighting, but there's some major developments going on in terms of recyclability and recycling infrastructure. And that was covered in the previous session of this event on the future of packaging. And as part of that, the packaging itself is developing. in light of these developments and trends that are happening in terms of recycling, and also the regulatory environment that we find ourselves in. Consumer trends continues to impact on the market for packaging. Consumers wanting fresher products, they want convenience. That involves developments in technologies like reclosability, developments in caps and closures, develops in on-the-go packaging. All of this is driving developments and trends in packaging technologies. There is a wider regulatory impact. In Europe, there's the EU Green Deal, which is going to have some major changes and lead to kind of further developments in sustainability and changes in packaging. And also in North America, in the US, there's state-by-state developments and changes in terms of waste regulation and legislation, and also impacts on recyclability and recycling infrastructure. And then as part of this also, there's a drive towards increased safety requirements that impacts on food safety, impacts on food contact, which anyone who's involved in packaging will understand the breadth of the regulation and legislation around that space, which again drives changes around packaging materials. E-commerce and the impact of Amazon is having a huge impact on everyone's lives. It's changing the different products that are now being sold to consumers, which also is having an impact on packaging. It's not just the primary packaging itself. There's developments in transit packaging and the supply chain itself and how products move through the supply chain. There's ongoing technology and innovation that's happening. So I'm thinking of smart packaging, of active and intelligent packaging, the impact of the Internet of Things, the impact of Industry 4.0. There's increasing developments around personalization, which leads to developments in printing. And I'm going to talk later about digital print, inkjet, and how packaging is being transformed, and will continue to kind of look very different in terms of shelf appeal, but also in terms of agile technologies for brands getting products to market faster. And finally, a big disruption that's happening is around supply chains. The impact of COVID demonstrated that supply chains were not as resilient as brand owners were hoping or expecting. There's a rowing back of globalization, and brand owners are looking for more local, agile solutions to getting products to market, even if the costs might be higher than previously. There's certainly an ongoing impact in terms of demand for raw materials like pulp, which is driving up prices. Container and shipping prices are increasing as well. It's leading to price pressures, which is having a big impact on the supply chain, which will also have a big impact on the packaging industry. I mentioned the four big trends that I wanted to talk about: sustainability, product safety, e-commerce, and digital print. And I'll start with the biggest trend that's impacting on packaging, and that's sustainability and recycling. Overall, there isn't a silver bullet or a single technology that meets all of the sustainability criteria and that will win out as packaging transforms over the next 5 years. Certainly brand owners and retailers are acutely aware of issues to do with plastic waste. This is now a highly documented trend, and something that the brand owners and retailers are fully committed to addressing and to dealing with their sustainability commitments, and particularly some major sustainability commitments that are going to happen over the next few years to 2025. The brand owners themselves, though, understand that the answer isn't simply switching away from plastic in all applications. Plastic actually serves many important functions, is still the go-to material for choice for a number of different end-use applications. So what's likely to play out, and I'll give some examples of this in a moment, is a move towards monomaterial barrier packaging. Monomaterial because it's much easier to recycle and to deal with at the end of life compared to multi-material, multi-laminates, which are very hard to separate, which potentially contaminate the recycling stream at the end of the product's life. And there's been some major developments happening in that monomaterial space as the plastic industry is fighting back with solutions which meet those sustainability and recycling criteria. One of the developments is in the growth of monomaterial recyclable pouches. There have been many new products being launched on the market in recent months. These have been in gestation for a number of years. Some of these were first mentioned at some of the major pouch and packaging conferences back in 2017. So these have been in development for many years. They're now kind of coming onto the market. And what we're seeing are major packaging converters teaming up with big brand owners to come up with these solutions. So Amcor partnering with Nestle, Mars Wrigley developing pouches for kind of chocolate applications, and Guala developing a range of monomaterial stand-up pouches for juice and kind of other applications. Interesting that some of these are coming into the pet food space. That's an area of growth and development where there's been a lot of disruption and interest around the general switch towards flexible packaging, and certainly the development of these monomaterial recyclable pouches is really going to help to continue kind of growth in that space. As I say, these are some of the examples that we've seen, and there's more in the works, and there'll be more announcements in the months and certainly in the years ahead in this space. Biodegradable packaging and biopolymers is another interesting area. There've been increased availability and acceptance of PHA materials, which are an attractive alternative for food packaging. Again, some interesting developments from companies like Sunoco and Corbion in the space. There has been some consumer confusion around the term biodegradable and what that really means. And is this a message that the brand owners want to kind of communicate to consumers? And some of that confusion has led to not quite the adoption levels in this space that we might have expected a few years ago. But certainly there continues to be appetite for developments in these biomaterials and kind of biopolymers. And we'd expect to see further developments in this space in the months and years ahead. Barrier coated papers, again, are being developed with the high barrier properties that are required for markets like dried foods. These have good process ability and available in a range of formats. And also, there are coated paperboards coming into the market for liquid applications. Now, they claim to have the kind of recyclability properties that are required. There's still some further research and further investigation about how these materials can be recycled using the standard processes that we have today. The liquid kind of applications are interesting because there's a question mark around the liquid cartons produced by the companies such as the big companies such as Tetra Pak and SIG, and that's a kind of an interesting space. The reason there are these question marks is because of the technology itself in these liquid cartons and the aluminium layer that's required for the barrier properties that these cartons bring. Again, this switch away from multi-layer materials, including liquid cartons, is a trend. And there are companies like Zotefoams with their HDPE monomaterial solution that performs like carton board, that are coming in and could potentially cause some disruption in this space. This is an interesting area because it's a plastic material that actually has strong sustainability credentials because of its ability to be recycled at the end of life, compared to the competitive materials where there are challenges around that aluminum layer that's contained within the packaging. Looking on at product safety, certainly tamper evident labels are an interesting market. They're driven largely by regulations and legislation within certain end use applications, such as medical and pharma. This is true in both Europe and North America, where there's been a raft of new pieces of legislation which are driving this continued use of these tamper evident labels and additional forms of information, whether it's leaflets or ways of communicating this information to consumers and end users. This tamper evidence technology is also increasingly kind of coming in because of consumer concerns of hygiene and product safety as well. And so we're seeing kind of tamper evident caps and closures and seals on a range of packaging formats, including for use in beverages, in food, including even in applications like personal care as well. And this is kind of driven by this kind of hygiene trend. That the evidence shows that this will be a kind of priority for consumers and for industry for years to come. So another interesting development in terms of product safety is the range of antiviral coatings that are coming to the market. Companies like DS Smith with their TouchGuard technology, developing antimicrobial coatings at scale. This technology comes from developments from decades ago in terms of from the active packaging space, active packaging and intelligent packaging space, where technologies like zinc and silver have been used and developed for this kind of antimicrobial packaging. So again, it's been a technology that's been there for a long time, and now potentially is finding a home and finding applications through to this demand for increased hygiene and safety. This has certainly been a kind of an interesting trend, because in a way the impact of COVID and the new normal has shifted consumer perception and increased the importance of hygiene and safety to a degree where plastic had its day in the sun, and plastic was perceived as a hero because of its properties and because of the hygiene and cleanliness that it kind of brings to the products that it protects. That was a small blip, we think, and over time consumers will shift away from plastics and go back to preferring other materials like paper and board. But it's interesting how sometimes these competing values and competing trends can play out and create different demand for different technologies. This is an interesting trend, and this was referred to in depth, I know, in the previous session that we had on recyclability. Procter & Gamble has developed the Holy Grail project, which uses digital watermarking for the tracking of products. The interesting thing about this is how Holy Grail 2.0 is now taking off. I think 85 brand owners and companies across the packaging value chain are now on board. AIM, the European Association for kind of brands, is kind of pushing the development in this space. And again, it's interesting how a technology, the Digimark technology that was developed for that brand protection market many years ago is finding a new home and a new application in terms of product tracking. And it's also interesting to look at the Honest Mark development that's happening in Russia. Russia is developing a very sophisticated track and trace system, which, if it takes off, could be a genuine game changer in terms of impact on the printing and impact on for digital printing, but also the impact on packaging as well. Could this type of track and trace system prove popular and be developed further in Europe, in the US, across Asia? It will lead to huge developments in terms of that digital watermarking, printing, coding, marking, and tracking technologies, which could potentially bring big benefits to manufacturers and across the supply chain, and also bring benefits for consumers who can check the viability of the products. Counterfeiting remains a big problem, and counterfeiting remains something that's been hard for consumers really to assess and to evaluate. And so there have been technologies over the years from holograms and watermarks and taggants, and those have all had their place, but could there be this new application linked to the rise of smartphones and 5G and the Internet of Things that would really give consumer confidence in the products that they see and the products that they are looking to purchase and use? Looking at e-commerce, we've seen a huge shift in terms of consumer buying behavior and preferences. We've seen 10 years of developments in 10 months. All of the charts, and there's some interesting stats here, but all of the charts are showing and demonstrating that e-commerce continues to grow and will continue to transform everyone's lives, but also the products that we're buying, and crucially the packaging that the products come in. E-commerce is interesting because it drives growth in new categories. So we can see, for instance, Smurfit Kappa's bag-in-box solution for kind of wine distributed and sold at home. We're seeing new lightweight postal solutions for new products that typically in the past haven't been purchased at home or haven't been thought about as products that can be distributed through the supply chain. And it's leading to disruptive brands looking to find new channels to market and looking to sell directly online. So looking around, there's a number of brands that are appealing directly to young consumers. They're developing social media friendly packaging. Their packaging is bright, it's designed to stand out. It reflects that kind of disruptive attitude. And interestingly, we're seeing the growth in specialty can sizes as a way of differentiating and as a way of standing out in the market. Digital print continues to grow. It has largely transformed the label market. It has moved into and is disrupting the corrugated space. And now the big question that everyone is asking is which is the next application, the next big kind of major substrate that digital packaging, digital print will take over. There's a lot of focus and a lot of interest on the impact of flexible packaging and whether we could see more digital print taking over in terms of the printing on films, on plastics, on pouches as well. Web to print is a proven market. There are big companies like Vistaprint, Flyer Alarm, who have pioneered this web to print model. As companies and consumers are becoming more comfortable buying directly online, will there be more developments in terms of web to packaging, buying solutions online? This is an interesting example of Compact that's developed an online solution for brand owners to kind of directly go online for their kind of primary and secondary packaging. Again, it's an interesting how that kind of e-commerce online shift is transforming different markets, and it looks like digital print could be could benefit from this shift as brand owners look to get more agile supply chains. They're looking to print in terms of shorter run lengths. They're looking to be more responsive and reactive, and certainly digital print ticks a lot of those boxes in terms of driving that transformation. Thank you very much. As I say, that was my overview on the major kind of mega trends that are happening, and a dive down into 4 of the specific trends. As I say, in summary, sustainability remains the #1 trend overall, and is transforming packaging with many new developments happening. But it's not as simple as kind of anti-plastics and paper taking over. It's really interesting to drill down into many of these specific technologies and developments, because in fact the plastic industry is fighting back, and there's many exciting things happening in that monomaterial space. Thanks very much.
So I'd like to ask the panelists, Carl, Paolo, Howard, and Phil, if you could come on video here. So in the next portion of this, we're going to talk through, different innovations in the packaging space. Advances in technology are reshaping, how the value chain operates in packaging, how packaging is produced, how the end consumer is engaging with packaging product. And COVID has really only increased the need for more innovation, whether it's some of the high performance e-commerce solutions, some of the technologies Adam spoke about, antiviral surface technologies, et cetera. Also technologies around, engaging with the consumer, digitally connected packaging and all that. So we'll dig into some of that with the panelists here today. So we have 4 panelists here in the packaging field, where we'll talk about the latest innovations in the packaging space. So I'll now, just let each of the panelists introduce themselves briefly, their organization, and then we'll jump into the questions. So Howard, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you. Yes, my name is Howard Manning. I'm the Vice President of New Product Development and Launch for Rieke Packaging Systems, which is part of the Trimas Group. I've been working for Rieke for about 8 years now. Started off as a general manager in China, responsible for 2 manufacturing plants, manufacturing dispensing products and caps and closures, mainly exporting into the North America and Europe. Then moved into a global business development review, responsible globally for new product, business development roles. And then 3 years ago, I came into the role I'm in now as new product development, looking at new products. Obviously, the trends obviously would have been spoken about, with innovation centers in Asia, Europe, and North America as well.
Phil, next.
Hello, yes, my name is Phil Bourgeois, and I'm a Senior Vice President of Global Technology and Regulatory Affairs for Tekni-Plex. Tekni-Plex is a global manufacturer of product solutions for the healthcare and consumer product segments, employing deep material science and process expertise in all that we do. For the healthcare product segment, we produce medical materials and tubing for medical devices, films and lidding for medical device delivery systems and for pharmaceutical products. And in the consumer product segment, we produce liners, gaskets, tubing, and protective packaging for the food and beverage, the home care and industrial, and the beauty and personal care markets. And we operate over 35 plants across 10 countries, with revenues topping over $1 billion, right? Now, as many of you may know, we're a portfolio company of Genstar Capital, based out of San Francisco, and we've been highly acquisitive, having completed over 14 acquisitions over the past 5 years and 8 acquisitions under Genstar's ownership, effectively doubling the size of our company revenue in recent years and nearly tripling our EBITDA over the last decades. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Phil. Paolo, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, my name is Paolo Ferrari. I'm based in Europe, so I'm a little far away from all the audience, I think. And I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Guala Closures, as well as the M&A Director. So I'm both looking to grow the company from a product, marketing, and acquisition point of view. It's a life in Guala Closure for me. So I entered in Guala Closure a lot of decades ago. And I don't know if you are aware, Guala Closure is a company that produce closures mainly for spirit industry, for the wine industry, as well as for the water and olive oil. Characteristic of the company is that we are very focused in this market. We have a worldwide exposition because we have around 30 plants in the world, covering 5 continents and 20 countries. So this is something that is one of the characteristics of a company in this market, to have this worldwide coverage. And the other characteristic is that the company is driven by innovation. Let's say that we are really focused to continue to make innovation in our product, mainly to support our leadership position. Thank you.
Great. And Carl, over to you.
Sure, thank you. So my name is Carl Joachim. I'm a co-founder, one of 3 co-founders and chief marketing officer for ePac Flexible Packaging. My background is not in packaging. My background is in digital printing. My career started with Xerox, and where we helped introduce really the first production class digital printer to enter the market, the Xerox 9700. Following my career at Xerox, I spent some time at OSE, which is now owned by Canon, again, bringing to market breakthrough digital printing technologies. And then at Rieke, 2006, they decided that they wanted to get into the production printing space. And so myself and 2 other people were brought on to Rieke to help build that business unit out. So I attempted to retire in the early part of 2013, and literally my first week as a retired consultant, so to speak, I met the 2 people who are my partners now at ePac, Jack Knott and Virag Patel, who some of you may know. So we started looking at the impact of digital technologies in the flexible packaging space. We spent a couple of years really looking at it, conducting focus groups, conducting market research, and so forth. And ultimately, we came up with the idea of a greenfield company that would focus on small, medium-sized businesses, not exclusively, but largely. And we would do so with a new product that HP was introducing, the Indigo 20,000. So we opened our first plant in Madison, Wisconsin in 2016. It was successful, and today we have 23 plants around the world. So in 5 years, we've essentially gone from no customers, 1 building, to 23 around the world, Europe, Africa, Canada, Indonesia, and further plans to expand in the next several months. So that's my story, and that's ePac.
Great. All right, well, thank you all. With that, we'll jump into the panel for the next set of questions. I'll direct each question to one of the panelists, but of course, the panelists should feel free to jump in as well as we're going through. But Howard, we'll start with you on the topic of e-commerce, which I know Adam spoke about as well. We see e-commerce penetration really continuing to grow and that step change during the pandemic. There may be perhaps some reversion as we emerge out of this period, but many believe that the elevated e-commerce levels are really here to stay. Estimates are that e-commerce as a percent of retail sales in the US are more in the 15% range, closer to the 30% range in the UK. So as we think about packaging innovations, what packaging innovations have allowed converters to provide solutions that are well suited to handle the demands of e-commerce, whether it's frustration-free packaging, ship and own container innovations. We've seen a lot out there. So what are some of the innovations and what have been some of the challenges?
Thank you, Amanda. I mean, Rieke's strategy has been to develop e-commerce products that meet the International Safe Transit Association, basically S2/6. But it's also to match the functionality and the aesthetic feel of the conventional dispensing products in the market today. The philosophy has been to have products that look and feel the same as the supply chain, as it were, i.e. supermarkets or stores, etc. There's also, I think, coming out of COVID more and more, I take more reference in the UK, as it were, where obviously through the pandemic more, outside of the Amazon or Alibaba in Asia, etc., has been in terms of supermarkets with their click and collect routes or their home delivery systems. Obviously in the pandemic, you can see a lot in the UK, a lot of supermarkets are now doing home delivery. So that is almost a secondary type of e-commerce channel there as well. One of the obviously other things we take into fact when we're designing e-commerce products is obviously to minimize the impact to the B2B customer. This is in terms of their change parts of their filling lines, which can be very costly and lengthy to change from a conventional dispensing product to an e-commerce product itself as well. Obviously, Rieke has done a lot of product research, etc., and understanding basically what we call the forces that a product sees in what we call the final mile of the traditional e-commerce channels. Now, with dispensing products, that's more around where the actuator or the head of the product will be bounced around next to other products that are being shipped in that e-commerce channel. And it's also designing a product that can overcome or resist those forces, that the head doesn't open and also the closure doesn't open from the bottle as well, to obviously generate a leak path there, product in itself as well. You know, you can over torque and you can have a very hard opening force on an actuator of a product, but again, that you want it to be exactly the feel the same as a traditional dispensing product as well.
Great. Any other thoughts from the other panelists?
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking that for packaging, we are really at the start of a huge changes with e-commerce. We see what is happening in other markets like the fashion, like electronics, like cosmetics, where e-commerce is incredibly advanced. And we have just to be creative, to have fantasy, because there is a huge field to make innovation. Innovation in a standard market without the e-commerce was a little, let's say, slowing down. Now with e-commerce, you can offer a lot of novelties and a lot of new products for that. This is what is our today experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, you know, at ePac, we were really the first in our space, short run, fast turnaround, focused on small, medium-sized businesses with a digital platform. And obviously, you know, we want to move into the direction of e-commerce. The problem with it is that our business is a lot more complex than many other businesses. And so creating an effective user experience and then the internal workflows to move these files through based on an e-commerce and web to print platform is something you just can't go out and buy. You know, I guess we're more or less pioneers in this space. And so I think we're focused on really doing some internal development to address those needs.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Why don't we switch gears a bit on the topic of safety? I know Adam talked quite a bit around that and thinking about the impact of COVID and the importance of safety across all aspects of life, but as it relates to packaging, whether it's innovations around tamper evidency, antiviral coatings, temperature sensors or temperature indicators, that, you know, really all of those innovations that we've seen, you know, grow in importance. So Phil, I'll start with you. What have been some of the more interesting safety innovations in the packaging space as we look beyond COVID, and which ones do you think have some staying power here?
Oh, thanks so much for your question. I think for sure, I think what we've learned and experienced over the past year is that, the coronavirus pandemic has impacted nearly every segment of the global packaging industry. And what comes out of that is that really most consumers are driving a fundamental challenge to manufacturers to provide protective and hygienic packaging solutions for the products that they use, but also in the manner in which they're experiencing them. As Adam, related there, earlier, was that certainly we've seen big increases in antiviral coatings for packaging, whether it's for plastic, paper, fiber-based for primary packaging, secondary packaging for delivery. We've seen that. But the other big thing I've seen is really a proliferation of plastic antiviral and antibacterial additive technologies. And these are such offerings as silver, zinc, silica, copper nanoparticles that are encompassed in the plastic themselves. And we see it a lot in flexible, rigid packaging. We see it in textiles for masks, for gloves, for gowning. We even see it in stretch wrap, for packaging of fruit and vegetables and for meat. And so typically under normal times, these types of additives, carry with them, significant cost of charges, right? So much so in some cases that you can even double the cost of the materials in your packages. But they're certainly carrying favor today. There's no doubt about it. People are utilizing them today. The question I think will be is, how long will it last? As time has gone on and on, I think when the virus first came out, everyone, don't touch anything because the virus lives on everything. And more recently, we've seen the CDC come out and say, well, the viral transmission on surfaces, not as much as we really thought. So I think over time that those things will kind of come down out of use. But at the same time, though, I think we see the importance of protecting, reducing the number of touch points that we have in packaging for all the distribution of products. So I think things will see. The other big area when we deal with protective packaging is really around tamper evidence. Not the typical tamper evidence we see today, with bottles and closures and things like that. But, what really surprised me is really for at-home and takeout delivery services, right? Things that, I think the big key there was for the consumer to have the confidence that the product they were getting from that restaurant wasn't tampered with after it was placed in that box and it reached them at home. And I think, a study a few years back actually, it probably played upon this, but a few years back actually said, about, 1 out of 4 delivery peoples was actually, pilfering some food for what they were trying to deliver. And then you base that with, with COVID and COVID technology that people, COVID people having, obviously that sent up a big thing that folks that really didn't want to deal with and the things that. And, I think I see this well, even like in the personal care markets. Who would have thought that you would have tamper evident shampoos? If back in the day, people would, lift the cover off, take a sniff, put it back on, and off you'd go. But today with COVID, you're not really seeing that happen. And I think it just opens up a big thing out there that people are using a lot of induction heat seal technology for those kind of things. And so I think a big thing is going to be, heat seal technologies that allow aroma or some kind of sniff sensitive sensing, for the consumers. And lastly, I think the one area change that I think has come about and will last and will have staying power is to all things associated with touchless dispensing systems, and that this packaging can really deliver and safeguard a hygienic user experience. So what's this going to be in? I can see going into restaurants, back in the day, you go up and you have condiments and you use the pump and you pump out what you need. Now I can see people going to, restaurants as they're opening up and essentially bringing things up in sensors that sense that you need it. And it's going to automatically dispense. So it's very, very touchless, right? But I'll see this technology, I think, really proliferate in beauty, in healthcare, and in personal care as well, right? I could see, if you think about like the back, beauty and bath stores, things on those things. Usually they have a common bottle where you go up and you pump something, you do test out a cream or a lotion, and things like that. With COVID, no one really wants to be able to touch that stuff, and so I think that people will be using these sort of things to really gain that experience. That again, a nice hygienic customer experience for those products and those types of things. So I think if anything, packaging innovators, really been busy, creating new strategies that deliver authentic product experiences in retail, at home, that really empathize, improve safety and sanitation. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Great. Love those examples there. Any other thoughts from the other panelists?
I think just to add on what Phil was saying there about touchless technology, and we developed touchless technology a number of years ago. And I think, there's a lot of back catalogue of technology that through the pandemic has actually come forward. Phil was talking about obviously dispensing, touchless coming through. And again, many years ago, that technology was quite expensive, not just in a development, but actually a manufacturing cost. And as like all new technologies, the price comes down and makes it more affordable. And I think there is obviously a bigger trend around touchless technology, in the QSR market as well. And I think on the safety side of it, I mean, we worked on a project a number of years ago around NFC technology. So this is the next level of tamper evidency where, everyone has a mobile phone. A number of years ago, Apple actually opened up their NFC technology on their phones because it was always around Android. So that's opened up another opportunity in packaging to have NFC technology that you can actually scan a product and it will say if it's been tampered with or not. So there's a mechanical tamper evidence, traditional, but then you have the new technologies of NFC technology as well.
Definitely. Great. So why don't we chat about sustainability a bit. This is a topic that we've touched on a lot over the past two panels, both the brand owner panel last Thursday, as well as the more converter recycling view earlier this week. And as Adam mentioned, there's no silver bullet or no single definition for what sustainability means in packaging, whether it is the monomaterial innovations at the substrate level, tethered closures we're seeing at the format level, especially in Europe these days, digital printing and the lower carbon footprint that comes with it. So lots of innovations out there on the sustainability front. But Paolo, I'll start with you. What are some of the sustainable innovations that you're most excited about in the packaging space?
You are right. I think that now sustainability starts to be a little headache for a packaging company. Let's say that to be able to drive correctly innovation of a company to get a result in sustainability is not so obvious. No? We as a company, we started in 2011 to have a sustainable approach of a company. And we started really with a corporate program. No? That was a little difficult at the beginning to convince the people that was a real positive program. But after that was not so difficult to start to get results because it was less, let's say, something more standard as all the other company. You have to save material, to reduce the waste of water, to have inclusion with the corporate social responsibility. It was something that was clear in the target and was also possible to measure. No? So the program developed quite well. And let's say that since 2011, in that kind of program, we get really important results. But then we started to think what is the way to drive the innovation and also all our R&D center from a product point of view. And let's say at that point was a little more difficult. We started in 2017, more or less. We made obviously mistakes and so on, because it was difficult to have the people, especially our technical people, our researcher, to be focused in something that was good to create value for the company, value for the customer, and value for the final user. So it takes us some time, but at the end, I think that we exit with get a good result last year when we propose to our people 4 guidelines way to project the new closure for us. So we had a big problem because our way to make development should be exposed to the worldwide market. And as was mentioned before, one of the problems that sustainability has is that regulations are very different one geographical area to the others. So you cannot give the same product and so give the same guidance to the research center that we have, because the results should be different, to have a product that suits the regulation of that area. So having this protocol of guidance help us a lot to have all the people involved in the research center, so that are the responsible to create new things and new product, to have a unique mind of what is the target, and that was very good. Since that, I think we get some results. For example, we are now collaborating a lot with the suppliers. Or, for example, we have an exclusive agreement with a US company named Ocean Works, that is really a platform and a global marketplace that recover all the plastic from the ocean, and we use this kind of plastic, we recycle, and we use to produce again closures. So this is a very interesting result, I think. Like another that I can tell, we are producing closures where together with the plastic is molded scraps of the production process of our customer. For example, in Mexico, the producer of tequila are using the agave as the primary source of alcohol for the tequila. We are taking the fiber of the resulting process of the agave, and we use this component in our closures. So these are all ideas and all results that we had from the sustainable program. It is not easy to get a result. We have customers that are pushing a lot, rightly. And we have a lot of pressure for customers to get these. We have a lot of help from the producer of raw materials. Let's say that we hope that the regulation will find a way to be a little more homogeneous around the world, because this is really a problem for us.
I think a lot of points around the regional differences and what the sustainable regulations are in the US, causing nuances is interesting.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts from the other panelists?
Just looking at it through the lens of being a digital shop, there is data around the material that we use in each and every pouch that can be carried through our workflow and actually imprinted, perhaps through a connected packaging application, so that a user, a consumer, if you will, would be able to look at that package and understand exactly what the environmental impact is. So by taking the data that we capture, that we create during our manufacturing process, and then marrying that with life cycle analysis software, something that we're looking at is being able to communicate to the consumer exactly what the environmental impact is for that specific pouch, because every pouch can have a digital identity.
Oh, that's actually a great transition to the next topic around innovations in digital, as you alluded to. And while this group and many of the viewers know that some of these innovations on digital technologies, existed long before the pandemic, whether it is, some of the digital printing ePac business does, or growth in digital features like connected packaging using NFC technology, for example, to either, to your point, Carl, allow for better tracing, counterfeiting capabilities and whatnot. But would love to hear, Carl, your views to start on, how digital technologies have been evolving, more recently coming out of the pandemic, and which ones you think are, most promising in the near term.
Sure. Well, when you look at digital printing just by itself, it's been around for 30 years. I've had a chance to see and be a part of that. And in packaging, labels were obviously the first packaging application that digital started to apply itself to. That evolved into folding carton, that ultimately evolved into inkjet technologies being applied to corrugated applications, and really flexible packaging is kind of the last frontier because it's just more complex and it's more just difficult. So from a printing platform standpoint, looking at innovation, what I would expect is to continue to see these suppliers of digital printing technologies move upstream to try to affect the real the transfer of offset or flexo or roto images down to a digital platform where the advantages of digital can be used. And so one of those advantages that, if I were to pick one that I am personally involved in is this idea of connected packaging. And you had mentioned it, Amanda. Connected packaging, again, it's not brand new. There are a lot of primarily big brands that are using connected packaging to communicate with consumers, to educate them on the authenticity of their brand, to protect their brand, to anti-counterfeit measures, to actually using it as a marketing tool. And since our market is, where digital lives is in primarily the small, medium-sized brand space, short to medium long runs, our challenge was to find a connected packaging solution that our market could use and could afford. And so we launched ePac Connect about 6 months ago, and we've been working with a partner, ScanTrust. They're a European-based company. And what we've done is we've brought a product to market that even small and medium-sized brands can afford. And with ePac Connect, essentially through a serialized QR code, where every single QR code on a package can be unique from pouch to pouch to pouch. We're using that technology so the consumers can scan it. They can engage with the brand relative to loyalty programs, coupon promotions, things of that nature. Again, if the brand chooses to want to authenticate their brand and tell their brand story, they could do that through ePac Connect, as well as the track and trace and anti-counterfeiting measures that I mentioned early. So, our belief is that with digital printing, every package can be born digital. Everyone can have a unique digital identity, and that identity can be carried in a serialized QR code that, when scanned, opens up marketing, product authentication, track and trace types of applications, with our mission being really to bring it down so that it's affordable to the small, medium-sized brand, which is really the growth sector of the food manufacturing space right now.
Great. A lot of interesting innovations there. Other thoughts from the other panelists on this topic, on the digital side of things? All right, great. Let's move on to the next set of questions. I'll also just remind the audience, we've seen some questions come through, so we'll look to get to those in the upcoming moments here. But I have a few other questions for this group. So maybe, Carl, back over to you, further to your points around the focus of ePac on small and medium-sized brands. Oftentimes in these markets, that customer segment perhaps has a different or more unique set of needs from their suppliers than perhaps a larger CPG may have, whether it's a more turnkey type of solution or what have you. So I'd love to hear your views on how you think about innovation priorities within this customer set. So the smaller brands, challenges perhaps that come with working mostly with the smaller and mid-sized brands as opposed to perhaps some of the larger tier 1 CPGs.
Yeah, well, for starters, our customers generally come to us because they don't have good options for flexible packaging. They can buy blank bags and put labels on them. They can, emulate the farmer's market look. They can overbuy because of higher minimum quantities, or they go overseas and then they deal, primarily China, and they deal with problems in terms of time, turnaround time, quality, and things of that nature. So honestly, what they start off with is all they want to be able to look like a big brand. They want to have big brand presence. And so with the same types of packaging, but made at an affordable price with lower minimums and fast turnaround, that specific need of our market is met fully by a digital platform. But you're right in terms of some other challenges beyond just being able to serve that immediate need to provide great packaging to small, medium-sized brands. And that's from our standpoint, we do get a lot of requests for kind of like super low orders. And there is a point in which, we're not going to do prototyping, for example. And so, our challenge and our brand's challenges is to simplify the process so that really any brand can, enact, a web experience, an e-commerce experience, a web to print experience that is very, very user-friendly, that allows even somebody that doesn't know anything about packaging, which most of these small, medium-sized brands don't, and walk them through being able to order packaging that meets their specific needs, whether it's greasy food, whether it's cannabis, and there are some barrier issues around that, those kinds of things. So I think, to sum this up, the immediate need of wanting to be able to emulate a big brand, I think digital does a good job in. But there's further work to be done to simplify that process to the point where somebody that doesn't know anything about packaging can go online and can order their packaging in a matter of minutes and know that it's going to be the right package for their product.
Paolo, a question for you. We've been talking a lot, both within the context of the closure space, but also in other areas of packaging, how some innovations are perhaps more defensive, anti-counterfeiting, tamper evidence systems, while others perhaps are more offensive. We were just talking about connected closures that can enhance the consumer experience, whether it's, via marketing materials, loyalty programs, what have you. But, in your role, how do you think about balancing those two types of innovations, ones that are perhaps more defensive versus offensive in nature?
Thanks, Amanda, for this question, because I think I have to say that our company has the major part of the revenues coming from anti-counterfeiting closures. So we are specialists in the world to produce closures to protect the contents of a bottle, especially in the spirit market, which is in certain areas of the world a huge problem, no? And is growing, no? It's growing and also is growing in an area that before weren't affected by this problem. For example, in the recent period, they were discovered adulterators that are really plant no, industrial plant, both in UK, in US, in all these countries, and so the problem is growing a lot. When you talk about defensive and offensive, I will talk more about passive and active system, because historically we were producing closure with a tamper evidence system, different way to open the closures. You have to break parts, you have to make something that was very visible, and so on. We were producing also one-way valve to avoid that a person could refill the bottles, a lot of things like that. And we call it this as a passive system, passive protection, because they are there, and let's say the customer shouldn't, the user shouldn't do nothing in terms of activate this kind of things. Now, since let's say 4 years, we are working a lot in order to introduce our kind of protection, like was Carl and Phil describing. So we produced a line of closures that is provided, for example, either with QR, unique or standard QR, either with NFC chip inside. But in this case, let's say that the final user should act. So that's why they are active. And so the final user should be, let's say, more experienced to use this kind of system. And this, I think, is still a problem for all these kind of things, also not only in the closure market. So we are switching from a passive user to a user that should know the system, should know what the system gives, and more than that, should have the time to use this kind of potential that is inside the new barrier protection. So he needs sometimes to scan, he needs sometimes to see the result, and we know that timing is something that is one of the most important constraints of our life. So we have to switch from one system to the other. That's why I say that the two systems are not one against the other, but there is no overlap of them. They have to stay and to live and to protect our package together. So I don't see really a fight between one system to the other. No, they have to really work together, because they have to balance also with the other part of the performance of the closure. So all these should become anyway an item that costs less, is very nice, you can handle easily. It works with the correct quality, so the full package should work perfectly, which is something that is the real challenge that we have.
Yep, makes sense. All right, next question is for Phil. I know earlier we talked about changes in the retail grocery landscape here and the impact that that's having on innovations in packaging solutions, whether it's the primary or secondary packaging changes required to support grocery e-commerce, whether that is delivery or click and collect, the use of micro fulfillment centers and different types of touch points in the grocery channel. So would love to hear your views, Phil, on what have been some of the challenges that packaging is facing, given the changes that are going on in the grocery channel, and what sort of innovations have been coming about to think about either reducing costs or enhancing that retail grocery experience.
Well, it's interesting, I mean, the COVID-19 pandemic and all these various stay-at-home orders in various communities has really resulted, as Howard had indicated, a huge increase in consumers purchasing groceries online, via the methods that was liked out, click and collect, home delivery, what have you, right? And the interesting thing, though, that in that particular growth, it also coincides with an associated decrease in the number of trips that consumers are making, right? They're going, but they're going a longer period of time. And so when they're collecting, when they're going there, they're buying, they're bulking up, if you will, right? And so it's quite a different dynamic. But I think the biggest result of that is that grocery retailers are now really challenged to find the right protective packaging, ensuring that purchases arrive fresh, intact, no matter if they're shipped, delivered, prepared for curbside deliveries, and what have you. And now, as we talked about earlier, that the traditional in-store traffic has gone down. This concept, I think, really brings along with it another challenge that really says you have to, more focus on extending the product's shelf life to keep foods fresher for longer, to avoid spoilage during the time periods, because they're making fewer trips, but bulking up in the meantime. And so, if we think about grocery, and my mind always comes to, I always think about the produce aisle, right? That's the first thing that comes to mind. In the produce aisle, and that aisle is always challenged because of food waste and all the resources that go into bringing in fresh produce, keeping it fresh. The consumers, actually has a really big impact on the eco footprint, if you like. And I really think it's really critical the product stays fresh on the shelf and makes it home to consumer and everything. And so what I'm seeing is believe it or not, a lot of these fruits and vegetables, they're being pre-wrapped, with active, flexible packaging, right? That really has been shown to really extend the shelf life, which protects the product. But now that you've wrapped the product itself, it helps to achieve pretty much a contactless and touchless packaging system that helps to protect the consumer and the people packing it, right? And so I think with all of this, we always have to really be thinking about that. We'll just say there's going to be a lot more packaging involved to keep things fresh and everything. So I think it puts another big challenge on folks, making sure that they're choosing the right materials to ensure recyclability or other forms of the sustainability measurement metrics that you'd like to use. But the other dynamic, I think, is that the grocery retail is really learning along and developing strategies, as we transition to this, I would call it an omni-channel approach, right? That the consumers are choosing all different ways to go about it. But if we think about grocery, the challenge there is that these guys typically have already very, very thin margins, right? And so if you're used to going to the grocery store and you're going down, you're seeing that a lot of small groceries are hired a lot more people to go pick orders and things like that. So that adds costs, right? And so it's a real dynamic there that goes into it. But what I think of what's really eventually going to happen, it really is going to drive a partnership with manufacturers of these products to really start thinking about design concepts to ensure that the proper shape and structure of these packages really allow for a lot more efficient space utilization at grocery stores, or even, for these micro fulfillment centers that you brought up, Amanda, as well as even warehouses that have automated pick, place, and package systems, whether they're ultimately for curbside pickup or sent for delivery. And so I think we're going to see a big shift in a heavy focus on cost reductions. And I think that's going to come from the packaging side. It has to, since you're already carving out already thin margins, right? And things like that. So I think that if you think in the past, when you go into a grocery store, there's a heavy focus that people place on obtaining the right shelf presence to catch the consumer's eyes, to induce, product selection from a full shelf of various competitors that you look at that, right? And so you've seen this like in food aisles, you've seen it in beauty care aisles, personal choice aisles. Those packages have to pop off the shelves. And some of these guys also do quite a bit that they appeal to the children that go with their parents. And so you'll see I've seen a lot of things where they'll put a lot of cartoon characters on things, a lot of dazzling graphics and things along those lines. Well, those cost money, those add costs. And now, since a lot of things are moving online, I think we'll see that those grocers really have to spend a lot of attention to ensuring that they're projecting a proper digital presence online, right? And so I think what we'll see is that if people are making their product choices for the digital aspect online, that just says, hey, you have to have a really good web page that shows you all the things, and you can start taking the costs out of this packages, right? You don't need this, super duper package on the shelf. It used to be that the package is the product, right? And a lot of money goes into it, for colors, for other sense capabilities of the package. And I think the omni-channel approach is really going to lead to, reduction in packaging, or the amount of money spent in the cost of that packaging. And I think it also leave a lot of CPGs thinking about how many different SKUs do I have to actually choose? How much am I going to have for retail? How much can I do for online? How much of this? I think the challenge is going to be for them. And so I think that's going to be, it's an interesting thing to watch, this retail groceries landscape, for sure.
Yeah, I brought up a lot of interesting points around SKU proliferation and how that relates to the pace of innovation and all that. So interesting topics that we curious to see how it unfolds.
Exactly.
The last prepared question here, Howard, is for you, and then I'll turn to some of the questions from the audience. But Howard, if we think about Rieke's business, you formed a lot of different partnerships in the past, with different organizations that allowed you to expand platforms, offer more sustainable solutions, accelerate growth with specific customer partners. So how do you think about partnerships, whether it's with raw material suppliers, customers, other value chain participants? How is that helping your organization drive innovation?
I think through VOC, or the voice of customer, with B2B partnerships with global brands, we know that the global brands, as it were, say in the HBHB, sustainability targets over the next 5 to 10 years. I think it's also equally important to understand the end market drivers, i.e. consumer demands, and we've had a lot of discussion around the war on plastic, etc. We also have policy and legislation, and also taxes, etc. I mean, obviously recently in Europe, in Italy, etc., there's now a plastic tax. There's a plastic tax coming in within the UK as well. These have been deployed to reduce plastic pollution and increase recycling. Now, based on these sort of inputs that we're getting, Rieke's strategy has been to develop products, and we've spoken about this a bit as well, on mono, true mono. It's one single resin, and it's not just a PP, it's only one grade of PP in a product. And luckily, Rieke has obviously developed a number of these products and launched them previously last year with some brand owners around recycling, and it's been mentioned before about ocean plastics and that as well. Also looking at, again, against commitments, also around PCR, post-consumer resin. And also, if you look at sustainability, it's not just about single resin, it's not just about post-consumer, it's also looking at, and part of the drive of innovation is to reduce the amount of plastic that's being used in packaging as well. Circle, as it were. So if you take all of those factors in there, and traditionally, as I mentioned before, when I first joined Rieke, manufacturing products in Asia and shipping them to the US and to Europe, that really doesn't fulfill the whole circle of sustainability, because you've got all these credentials to be sustainable, but then obviously you've got a carbon footprint and the transportation of those products as well. So again, even before, I would say that the latest drive on sustainability, it's all about localization as well. You know, and this is not just about making it in Europe, you're making it in the country. You're almost making products next to the filling lines, as we've done it in the US a lot with some of our bigger partners as well. And obviously that, you know, as I said, if you make it in Asia, shipping, you're nullifying all of those gains. So you've got to have that complete sum of VOC, as I said, from understanding post-consumer trends, etc. as well.
Yeah, no, that's great, and actually relates to the first question, which I'll open it up to the panel, is around, you know, given Adam's keynote and calling sustainability as, you know, perhaps the largest driver in packaging innovation. Often, though, initially spoken about first in some consumer-facing end markets, but I know for some of you, you touch on the healthcare space, and you know, do you see sustainability as the key driver of innovation in the healthcare space, and how perhaps maybe is it different in healthcare versus some of the consumer end markets you all interplay with?
Sure, I'll start off with that, since we do a lot of healthcare for quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think there, what I observe, and as you said, sustainability can mean many different things to many different people, right? So it's just not, in some cases, a material or what have you. Or, but in the medical space, in the healthcare space, you also have the government regulation that deals with something. So there are particular things. If I think about some pharmaceutical films, straight off, I mean, the requirement is that there is no post-consumer. The requirement is there is no, it all has to be virgin material. So that kind of limits you what you can do from a materials side, but it also gives you an opportunity. Can I down gauge? Can I think about ways that I can do that? Can I be more efficient? Can I deal with things to get more on a truck, if you will, things along those lines? So it does allow you to really think outside the box, other than just the material portion of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts from the other panelists? Great, I'll go to this next question here, which is geared at both Phil and Paolo. You both mentioned the acquisition-based growth strategy, or at least acquisition being a part of the growth strategy for each of your businesses. When you think about evaluating potential acquisition targets, how important is their innovation capability, let's say, versus some other criteria you may be considering?
Well, Paolo, if you want to go first, I'll go first for either way.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Paolo. Go ahead.
I was
Great,
mute. I was mute. No, let's say that for us to buy a company has been very important to be localized in the world. So we try to develop a network of companies covering the world, and was important so to find in each country, in some countries, a potential target. Why this? We talked before about sustainability as the most important now driver, but I don't want that sustainability will cover some of the key points that are the development of the market. I try to explain me better, because under sustainability there are a lot of drivers. There is still not a common view, but we have not to forget the customer, the user, the final user. And we noticed that more and more the direction is to go to be local, but not really yes, is also for reducing LCA, reducing transport, reducing generation of CO2. But there is really an attitude of the consumer to prefer local producer, the local product, the product that have an origin, that are linked to the culture, that are linked to the habits that are in each part of the world. So this is important. We saw that pandemic boosted this aspect, but this aspect was already before. If you know the craft beer or the local way to eat, this was already starting, and this will certainly grow up also in the future, also when we will solve this tough problem of the pandemic. So to be localized and to have a possibility to buy a company that knows how to develop the local market. And when I'm saying to develop, immediately is an innovation attitude. It's not a follower, but is a company, a team of people that is looking how to improve the market. For us, is one of the most important part of the evaluation of a potential acquisition.
Yeah, and what I would say to that, for sure, sustainability innovation, for companies that we would consider for acquisition, for sure, it's up there in the ticker in importance, for sure, because we find those companies are more market facing, right, and they're delivering essentially what their customers want to buy.
Yeah.
They're not giving them things that they want to sell. They're giving them things that their customers want to buy. So they're actually market facing. They're market driven those particular ways. So those are sort of the things that we would consider as one of the evaluation points for sure at various targets that we would look at for sure.
Great. The next question, I'll open it up to the group. If you compare your pre and post-COVID innovation processes and focus areas, what are some of the important changes, perhaps, if any, that you would highlight?
Well, it was interesting. The COVID thing changed quite a bit. When COVID first, came on the scene, there was a massive change in our customers' focus on what they were trying to put out there. And in many cases, development kind of slowed down quite a bit because everyone's focused on manufacturing, getting their existing products out the door, which really led to a slowdown, if you will, on different projects, development projects, what have you. So we utilized that time to actually work on projects that, again, sustainability was a big thing for us that we wanted to get to, one of the things like that. So we utilized those downtimes, if you will, to focus more. It's still using our development resources for those things, since they're not focused on our customers, focus on things we wanted to do. And so I could see that it's had a positive effect for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit of opposite for Rieke, because we were looking at supplying 2cc dispenser pumps, and there was a huge demand over the last 18 months, as it were. So there was almost an acceleration, and we need to put more capacity in. Now, do we want to put capacity in for old technology or for the new technology that we're only developing? So there's a lot of pressure from a consumer, from internal business to say, look, we want to bring forward your mono technology, etc., around dispensing pumps quicker than you had actually anticipated. So we had a lot of pressure on development to actually bring it forward to put new capacity of new products rather than investing in old technology as well.
Yeah, from our standpoint, during the COVID pandemic, our volumes continued to increase. So we didn't see any drop off, whatsoever. And because our businesses are community-based, they serve the small, medium-sized brands that are around that, you know, where that plant is located. And so we get involved with a lot of community efforts around sustainability, around working through COVID. And so if anything changed for us, I think it strengthened the bond that we have with the communities that we play in.
For me,
Go ahead, Paolo.
yeah, for me, COVID will help a lot the future introduction of connected package and connected solution. Because as we were saying before, you know, that when we were talking about passive and active tamper evidence, no, the active tamper evidence of the active system needed some free time from the user to be familiar with this kind of system, and also need some free time to have the user familiar with all the potentiality, a part of the security that a connected package can give, no? Like consumer engagement, all the possibility to attend to some seminar, the real connection. During COVID, we have to tell that we had a lot of time, of free time, because we were insulated at home, you know, so we had the time to make experience of this kind of systems. So I assume, and I'm sure that when we will start to have again our freedom, this kind of attitude to understand better the product, understand better what one is buying, and to get information from the product through the connection of the package will be something that will remain and will even be more important.
Great. So we're just about at time here. I want to be cognizant of the panelists' time. This has been a great discussion. I know we didn't quite get to all of the audience questions, but you know, I'd encourage folks to join the lounge function after, where you can you know, ask any follow-ups you had, you know, of the panelists or of Adam as well. But I just wanted to take the time to thank Adam. Thank you for the keynote speech, and thank you, Paolo, Carl, Phil, and Howard for the discussion today. It's really great to have you all, and thank you all for coming and joining us.
Thank you for having me, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoyed. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone, and thanks to the audience as well. Bye.